morning, everybody. Mestre Sucuri coming to you from Tokyo, Japan. Mestre Vibes, episode 58. Today, I've got a contemplative podcast. I'm sitting here looking out, and it's rainy season here in Japan. My morning started off incredibly well. Of course, it's always with my lovely wife making every day start off in just an amazing way. Today, I want to talk about something that I don't think people talk so much about in the capoeira world, or at least as a specific topic. Today, I want to talk about mentorship. What is the responsibility, or what is mentorship, or how does it function in the capoeira world for a mastery such as myself? Again, I'm always using just the term mastery because it's all-encompassing versus, I don't want to be like having to repeat myself, master all the time. So I'm just going to use the word mastery and how it relates to me. But this goes for anybody teaching capoeira, profesor, profesoras, formadas, formados, contramestres, contramestres. It doesn't matter. It goes to everybody and hopefully things outside of capoeira. One of the most crucial aspects of being a mastery of capoeira is the ability to understand what is mentorship and how I look at it. What mentorship is, sometimes we might even call like a padrino or padrina now in capoeira. It's just not like someone is connected directly to a capoeira group because they might have had some issues. They might have quit their group. They might be starting new. They might have moved, and they realize that the current or past relationship doesn't give them what they need so that they can feel like they're moving forward, right? Sometimes this happens and people leave their groups or move forward, and in the process, they find someone else to be a guiding light, a mentor, or a padrino in many cases. For example, for me, my padrino of what I do in capoeira is Mestre Boa Gente, and someone who I have an incredibly high admiration for. There's an expression in Portuguese that I love. It goes, "Tem que respeitar por cabelos prateados." You have to respect him for all the silver hairs because he has the experience and he's doing good. Like, he's doing well for himself and he's doing well as a mestre, in my opinion. And it's something I really respect and something I really am able to reflect on. So let's jump right into it. Mentorship. One of the most important facets of mentorship, of course, is experience and expertise, right? You have to have experience of capoeira. For me, 36 years, and expertise. I've dedicated my life. I've put so much into it, not just in the techniques, which is, I always talk about. It's kind of funny because I'm pre-internet, so a lot of this stuff that I was doing, like the backflips and all the crazy capoeira that I used to do, is now not really. I mean, my friend used to bring his 8mm video cassette machine, so a video cassette recorder, to record what I was doing, so that people know like what I'm doing, and it was impossible to just upload it, right? So I do have a couple of videos of me going a bit wild when I was younger. And in the process, it's grainy, but it's old school, right? So there's a little bit of testament to how much or what level I reached as capoeira. History and philosophy, 2 master's degrees, one in Waseda University. I've said this before. So that and the other one, San Diego State. So that gives me a lot of credibility, not just that, but also the research, right? And I know always people say, well, that's, academic and that doesn't count. Yeah, but I did the academic alongside my growth in capoeira. This helps me to provide valuable insights into both the physical, cultural, and philosophical aspects of the art of capoeira. This is so important. For example, when sometimes I'll be doing a workshop or something and I'll hear somebody say something that's so far out from what actually is real that it's sometimes I just got to stand back and go, okay, look, be careful with this information. Where did you get this information? And a lot of times people in the capoeira world will just say their experience or what they heard or what they heard as a quick, or now, like, I saw it on Instagram, so they think it's the truth. And there's let's remember that anything you post, there's rarely any way to check it. But if you put the time in, you really can. So the expertise is a very important thing, and experience to know, take everything with a grain of salt. The next thing a mentor really needs to have is empathy. And empathy is really the ability to feel for what other people, or try to understand other people's challenges and fears of other new students. You got to be able to offer support when they feel like they're not improving, or most importantly, just be there and not be, pounding on them, because everybody has a different learning style. Recently, I have a new student who joined, a little bit older gentleman, somewhere around 45 to 50. And he had mentioned to my wife that he had tried a couple other capoeira groups in Tokyo, but one of the teachers made him feel like he was incompetent or not getting it. Like, I guess he was taking more time to understand the basics, and the other teacher didn't have the patience or the empathy and understanding that people learn at different levels, and was getting frustrated. I think my wife had said something like, the teacher was like, "How can you not understand this? I've taught you this so many times. How can you not do it?" And I mean, there is that frustration that we all feel as human beings when dealing with other people. But when you get to the level of a Mestre, I think you really need to have a little bit more empathy and a little bit more patience than the regular level of teaching. If you can get it from an earlier stage, that's fantastic. But if you can't, you really need to understand how to really have empathy towards people, because we all learn at different levels and at different speeds. And there's an expression that I always think about, right? It says, capoeira is for everybody, but not everybody is for capoeira. I agree with that, but at the same time, a teacher should be able to teach to everybody, but not everybody can learn. I think we need to be really careful, because just people have different ways of learning. And if we start thinking in that way, then maybe we limit ourselves. If one person doesn't have the ability to teach somebody, it might not be the teacher. It could be that the student needs somebody else. And in the past, I've told students, or students have told me, our styles don't match for whatever reason, and they've left to go to other groups. Or in some cases, when a student is a little difficult to deal with, I'll say, look, I cannot give you what you're looking for as a Mestre at this point in time. So I think it's better if you find another Mestre or something else. And it's actually gets easier every time, because at the same time, I have to understand that I have other people waiting. Other people, my time isn't infinite. I have limits and restrictions, and I have to do other stuff. I'm also a husband, a father, a family man. So I cannot be dealing, 24 hours a day with everybody. But the core point of being able to have this empathy is really important, especially at the higher levels, or as being a Mestre or a Mestra. One thing that I do now, which it's kind of hard because it's a catch-22, is really try to engage in active listening. For example, I'll always ask at the end of class, well, not always, but generally, I'll ask if anyone has any questions about anything I did today. I try to be very clear and organized in how I teach, and I hope that people have the comfortability. But generally, my students give a really, good response. Say, no, we're good. We understand, all good. A lot of my students have been with me for a while, so I think that helps a lot too. And I always take a second ask to new people, so make sure that they're feeling comfortable with what they did at that particular point in the class or at the end of the class. And I give people opportunity to tell me. I always tell people, anything for you, especially for like people who are close to me. And that includes my listening time, my active listening time, listening to how they're doing with their groups, how they're doing with their capoeira training, how they're doing with their personal lives. By no means am I a trained psychologist, and sometimes people think that being a Mestre is an expert in human behavior. It's not. I'm here as best I can. And in the mentorship role of a master, one of the things is to just listen and to do my best. But I rarely give definite answers back. I try to help people find what's best for them. But at the same time, at the end of the act of listening, because I listened, I'm able to give what I would do in response. And a lot of times it's very direct. And a lot of times the people listening go, I know. But, it's just part of, as you gain experience and expertise, especially experience in life, you're able to differentiate and not to waste time, right? Active listening also means active consideration and response. And I think that's a very important part of being a capoeira master for me. I mentioned it earlier, and I always think about this so much, but a lot of people that I come across, and this isn't just in capoeira, this is just as people in general, lack a lot of communication skills. A master really needs to clearly explain what they do. And honestly, with a lot of stuff I do when I deal with other people, especially like other masters or people in the capoeira community or anything event-wise, I always get it digital. So I'll write it in an email versus if I call, I'll send an email later, say, this is what we talked about. And then say, what do you, is this right? I'm checking information. Why? Because it's a one way also in this world of feeling, and this world of personal relationships, being able to have what I said in a text email. And that takes a lot of responsibility off me. So this communication skill of checking information is really important. It's also with the students, like I said, at the end of class, I say, hey, did anyone have any questions? Come in early if you need anything. I'm here. I have a lot of people who send me videos, and I do my best to communicate how they can improve, validate. Sometimes I have to, say this is, different from how I do it. And this is just part of the process, right? But it's part of communication skills. So I'm doing my best to maintain relationships with people who value my time and my expertise. Especially like people from our Patreon. Thank you, Patreon community, for always being there for me, always supporting. Anyone who's listening to this, if you want to help what I do or get access to everything else I do, a lot of people on Patreon use Patreon as a direct contact to me. And a lot of people who are just like $3, $5, $10 a month, supporters might even actually send me, 2, 3, 4, 5 emails a month asking for, mentorship. And I'm happy to do that. And I don't feel there's a price on that, but it's really nice when people show their support because it helps me with everything I do behind the scenes. Like this podcast, right? It's open and free to everybody. I put it on YouTube, and it's on a couple other I put it on my Instagram, and I hope that it comes through for everybody and helps everybody. So if you're interested in supporting what I do, go to my Patreon page and check it out. Sorry, I guess that's what people do nowadays. They put a little commercial inside of what they're doing. Next point that's really, really important in the mentorship role is encouragement and support. When I started capoeira, the first couple teachers I had lacked the ability, for whatever reason, to just simply tell me, good job, like, good, oh, that's awesome, you're doing well. Like, almost like ego was always present, and they couldn't say anything positive because it would take away from their ability or their ego or their status, power, or atmosphere, or whatever you want to call it, their ashe. So a lot of times people never complimented me. So at the beginning of my capoeira career, I kind of also felt that, but I also always had a strong sense of self-confidence and not really caring. Maybe that has to do with how I was brought up in my own home. And if I listened to people putting me down or not giving me positive support and encouragement, then maybe I would have turned out a lot different. I had to find that within myself by looking in the mirror. At times, it might have looked a little bit narcissist or egotistical, but nobody gave me that, so I had to do it myself. Growing up the way I did, the education system, I don't know if I've told you guys this story. When I was people asked me like, how was it for you growing up? And I said one thing is when I was the end of, I want to say 10th grade, it's about 15 and a half, things were really bad at my house. I really was rarely at my house anymore. I had a part-time job. I was working at Miss Cookies in Horton Plaza. I used to stand out there with an apron and a red hat and a red apron. Would you like a free sample today? Hi, could I interest you in a free sample of a chocolate brownie? Yes, that was me. And that's what I was doing at 15 and a half because Southern California, we had if you come from a disadvantaged or low, below the poverty line family, instead of going to high school, like for the last 1 or 2 class periods of the afternoon, you could get out earlier and go work pretty much full time. So that's what I was doing. I was doing about 30, 40, almost 30 hours a week when I was a kid at Miss Cookies. And this is a lot because it was difficult to be where I was. And my grades suffered because of this. And I really had no interest in the level of education that I was getting from a high school. It wasn't because I was dumb. It was because I felt the program was so slow. But it was one of those programs where you have to wait for everybody. So I just felt that it went slower than I wanted to be going in life at that moment. And there was this teacher who was like literally a piece of manure. This guy was like a work of art. Like later, after I'd left high school and everything, so many people had complained about him. But at that time, no one did anything, right? No one was going to get him fired, written up, because no one felt they had any power in a minority area against a white American teacher, right? And when I was middle to the end of 10th grade, and I was already like half truant anyways. Truant means I didn't go to class. This guy calls me in, and I won't mention his name, but like other people will know. He just started berating me, saying I will never be anything. I'm a loser. That I should think about just. He just really went into me, which now, at this point, I could have sued. And I'm sure if he did it to me, he did it to other people, and it was obviously some kind of power trip. Or for a guy who was like he was supposed to go to Vietnam War, and he had joined the California National Guard so that he could avoid going to Vietnam, which is a smart move, but it does put a lot of credibility issues on what he was talking about. You can't be telling it. You can't act tough, and this guy was not the toughest guy. Like at that time, I had so much respect for what a teacher was, but I knew other students who had literally punched teachers in the chest. So from junior high, just from the area I grew up in. But now you could get a lot more like, like maybe mental abuse, stress harassment, but that didn't exist back then. And this guy berated me, and I was like, and as he's saying this, it really didn't bother me at the moment, but I was like, look, man, I'm barely here anyways. I get enough of this at home. So that's it. Next day, I never went back to school, and I moved out like 2 or 3 days later. A friend of mine, they were renting a house, and I rented one of the main rooms with one of my coworkers from Miss Cookies, and we carpooled, and it was really cool, and it was the beginning of my life. And then later, moving on to other things. But not having that encouragement and support is such an important thing, especially for young minds, especially for people who need it. I'm very skeptical to over-encourage because a lot of times what I see is people will give too much validation when it's not needed. So being able to be a good mentor, a good master, is being able to balance the level of encouragement and support with the level of direct and down-to-earth criticism, or critique. So you got to be able to balance all that together. But don't forget the importance of encouragement and support. The next point that I want to talk about is going to be something that's going to hit a lot, but just because of the background of where capoeira comes from, and people might not like this, but everybody I know agrees, is this the importance of integrity and trustworthiness. Kids come to my academia, I hug them, I kiss them. They're giving me massage when they're switching, like who's training at that moment, who's not. We have events. I've taken kids to camping with like parents and other adults around. I show up on time. I do my best for events. For the adults, I make sure that I'm always here on time. I'm always here. My classes start at 7:30. I'm here at 7. Generally, I'm here all day because I'm working on things like this. There's a lot of stuff I do for capoeira outside of just teaching, which I realize I teach about 16 classes a week, 2 of which are the boot camp. So I'm here all the time and feeling, very blessed to be doing everything I do. But if you don't have that integrity and trustworthiness, people will not value your mentorship or your opinions. Like being true to the values and the fundamentals of capoeira, leading by example is something I always talk about. Demonstrating respect, fairness, and dedication so that my students can give me their trust. But not only the students, but the people in their lives. Because you build a community when you have integrity and people trust you. So this is very important when you make an event, and people, like every year we do the Halloween, people know that's coming, people get excited, people are involved, and we have a great event that's outside of capoeira. Being open-minded, of course, is super important in this modern day and era. The older I get, the more experience I get, the more I've seen, the more I'm able to just step back and go, look, I've seen this situation before. One of the best comments I got after my first book in 2014, The Path of Capoeira, was how much it directly reflected or mirrored other people's experience in the capoeira world. I had about a dozen emails of people saying, Mestre, this book is amazing. I'm reading it and it's exactly what's happening to me, because I think general relationships, people, culture, capoeira culture doesn't really change around the world. The base is what it is, for good or for bad. I prefer it. I love the Brazilian flavor to capoeira. And putting anything inside of it is just like taking away that magical part of capoeira. But being open-minded to other approaches, to other people, to other styles, to other philosophies in capoeira, it doesn't mean I have to accept or listen, but being open-minded to listen. And this goes back to, the ability to listen. Finally, it's something that's very important for capoeira is being able to, when you mentor and lead, is to create milestones for your group, for yourself. If people feel it's just showing up every day like an aerobics class, but with no goal, then it does dissuade some people, and it does take away a little bit of how people feel and how committed they are to the capoeira group, the classes, and to their mastery. I talk about this, the difference between a customer, a client, a student, and a disciple. And not having goals will not help you to differentiate or for students to choose at what level of participation they want to be with their mastery, their group, and the greater capoeira world. So being very goal-orientated is super important. And this leads me to my last point, which I hope you guys like this one, because it's a lot of contemplation over the last few days on these points. And the last point is just, being available, having commitment to your students. Do your students feel that you have time for them one-on-one, that you demonstrate to that they're you're committed to their growth, to your growth, to capoeira, to the community that you've built, to everything. Do the people around you feel that you're committed? Availability. I remember I always tell the story, like when I first came to Japan. Japanese culture has this concept that foreigners come and then leave. It's not a permanent thing. There's no concept of like the Japanese dream, like the American dream, move to America, become American and be accepted and grow. That doesn't exist here. It's just a cultural thing. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying about that one concept about like it's a place for immigrants, for people to move from other countries. That's not how Japan works. And at least in my opinion, so it took a long time because like for the first couple of years, right, people would be like, oh, how long are you, when do you go back to your country? When do you go back to your country? When do you go back to your country was a common thing. And it wasn't until I got married and even more when I had my first daughter, my daughter, and when we opened the academia, did everything start changing. I've had people say, oh, people lived in Japan. The funny thing is, you don't really live somewhere unless you have to follow by their rules outside of a protective environment. If you come here in the military, like say go to Okinawa, you're not really living in Japan. And if you come as a graduate student or a college student, you're not really living in Japan because you're protected by the institution and generally funded by that institution. But when you have to work here, for example, work at one of the English schools that's Japanese owned, or you have to open your own business, learn about the tax laws, learn about what are the laws in regarding to simple things like, for example, the police used to come here a lot when the kids were too loud having fun. The law changed here because so many people were complaining and so many acts of kind of insane violence at schools and at local like preschools and whatnot. So it's illegal in Tokyo now to complain when kids are loud. I know it sounds strange, but that's the way the law evolved here. And unless you know these kind of things, unless you're part of it in those experiences, it's a little different. I'm not devaluating your ability that you live somewhere else, but it's very different when you have a safety. And for example, if you're a person working at the U.S. Embassy, you're living in Japan, but you're not really living in Japanese society. We can debate that in another place, but it's something I really feel is very important to think about because I've done both, lived as a visitor and lived as a worker. So 25 years here in Japan. If anyone would like to talk about Japanese culture, I'm always happy to talk about that and my opinions and my experience here. But once Japanese people saw that I was committed, that I was based, that I was here, they saw me taking care of my in-laws. They saw me taking care of the community. They saw me getting involved in some of the local festivals. They saw me doing work at the elementary schools, the junior highs. They really saw that I was involved. Then the commitment changed, and now I couldn't imagine how long it would take if I moved back to the States to build this kind of reputation, availability, and network for myself. I get so much support now that it's insane. Guys, that's my opinion on mentorship and what a padrillo should be doing or a mestre of capoeira. I hope you guys liked today's episode. Always, if you have any questions, hit me up. Lots of love, lots of peace, lots of capoeira. Mestre Sucuri, Japan. August, I'm coming to Sacramento, Colorado Springs, and Denver. Have a blessed day.